So I just finished recording this whole video and I am so sorry it came out to be super long. I just laid out all the details for you. I wanted to be as specific as possible with some of my experiences and just overall user experience with the devices. So I ended up being way too honest and way too detailed. So just take it as you will. Hopefully it helps. So enjoy. So this is the S23 Ultra versus the OnePlus 11, and both of these devices came out around mid-February, so in the US, they released around the same time. And there's a big price difference between them. So the OnePlus 11 starts out at $699 for the base model, and then the base model of the S23 Ultra starts out at $1199. So pretty big difference, but I do have the second tier models for both of these devices. So the OnePlus 11 costs $799 and then the S23 Ultra costs $1379. But you also have to take into consideration there's trade-in offers, there's promos and all that kind of stuff. And when I pre-ordered, I got a good bonus or promo for them. So both of them got a trade-in offer of $500 plus some accessories and stuff like that. So in reality, I think I paid like around $300 for the OnePlus 11 and then around $700 or so for the S23 Ultra. So still a pretty big difference when it comes to pricing. So keep that in mind as we talk about these devices. So starting off the build and design, the S23 Ultra does use Corning Gorilla Glass Victus 2 on both the back and on the front, and then has an aluminum frame. The OnePlus 11 will use Corning Gorilla Glass 5 on the back, Victus on the front, and then also an aluminum frame. So that basically means that I think the S23 Ultra can withstand drops from a higher elevation and also withstand rougher surfaces. But either way, they're both glass, so I would always protect these devices. So I am always rocking a case. Personally, on the S23 Ultra, I'm using the D-brand grip case. Hella expensive, but super grippy and super comfortable to hold in the hand. Also adds some pretty good protection. OnePlus 11 doesn't have the D-brand grip case, so unfortunately I don't have it for this device. I wish I could get it for this device because the grip case is becoming my favorite new case. Not sponsored by D-brand, but I like it, and the fact that you can add skins is pretty nice as well. But for the OnePlus 11, I am using their Sandstone case, so it's a first-party case. It's relatively thin and adds some grippiness to the device itself, and a little bit of weight and a little bit of thickness. But overall, it's a pretty comfortable case and not as expensive. But for inexpensive cases, I usually go for speaking cases. But that's just for cases in case you were curious as to what cases I would recommend, because I always recommend rocking a case on your devices. Now talking about the actual build though, if you're using these naked or just nude, on the S23 Ultra, you are going to get like a boxier look and boxier feeling device, versus the OnePlus 11 is going to be more rounded all around and curved feeling. So with the S23 Ultra, you have a frame that's kind of flat on the side here, so it does add a pretty nice grip when you're holding it like this. But then the top is also flat, but so that when they meet in the corner, it is rather sharp. So in your palm when you're holding it, it does feel just a bit uncomfortable when you're holding it like that, versus the OnePlus 11. The frame itself is actually very thin on the sides here, just because, again, similar to the S23 Ultra, the back glass and the front glass curves a little bit, and then they make the frame very small right here. So it makes it look very thin, thinner than it really is. Even though it is thinner than the S23 Ultra, it just makes it look very, very thin. But then that frame blends into the actual camera array of the OnePlus 11, which is a circular camera bump, and it's rather thick, so it does rock pretty heavily when you're putting it on a flat surface, versus the S23 Ultra has a more simpler camera system where it doesn't have an actual big camera bump. It just has the lenses sticking out a little bit from the device. Again, it does rock a little bit, and I guess you could be considering it a little bit more fragile, because you might accidentally hit one of those lenses individually. On the OnePlus 11, it's just one flat piece of glass and all the lenses are within it. So either way, you can take that as you will. And one thing I want to mention is the feeling of the glass. Both of them are matte finishes, technically. And on the S23 Ultra, it's more of a soft glass, versus the OnePlus 11 has a bit of a texture to it. So you can really hear it when I'm like putting it up against my mic, versus the S23 Ultra. It's a little bit less subtle. Just feels a little bit odd in my hand, which is another reason why I do use a case, just because I'm not a huge fan of the feeling of the OnePlus 11. And speaking of which, if you get the other color for the OnePlus 11, which is the Eternal Green, I believe, that finish is a glossy finish. In fact, those are the only two colors that OnePlus offers for the OnePlus 11. Titan Black, which is this one, or the Eternal Green, which will be glossy. The S23 Ultra, on the other hand, has a bunch of other colors. So first, their standard colors, I believe, are green, lavender, beige, and then black. Then you have the S23 Ultra exclusive colors, which you can only get off Samsung site. The sky blue, a graphite, a red, and I think a lime as well. So there's like a total of 8 different colors you can choose from on the S23 Ultra versus just 2 different colors on the OnePlus 11. It may matter to you, it may not. Like I said, I use a case, so it's not a huge deal to me, but I kind of do like this sky blue on the S23 Ultra, if I'm being honest. But overall, the button design, both of them I think look pretty gorgeous and unique overall. And as far as the feel, I would say the OnePlus 11, if you want to get a more lighter feeling and thinner and not a thick feeling device, then you're going to like the OnePlus 11. It's a big device, but also doesn't feel huge in your hand compared to the S23 Ultra that just feels like a tank in your hand. It's heavy, it's thick, it's a big boy, it's wider, taller, like it's just the biggest device you can possibly get out there. That's going to be the S23 Ultra. So depending on what kind of feeling you like, that might sway you one way or another. Now, as far as like the buttons and ports and other hardware, both of them have USB-C at the bottom. Both of them have dual firing speakers. Now, I will say that both of them have improved from last year's dual firing speakers, like from their predecessors. But comparing them is pretty tough. I would say the S23 Ultra just maybe sounds a little bit better overall, a little bit more well-rounded versus the OnePlus 11. Just hits those lows and bass pretty hard and pretty good. But then when it gets to the highs, I think it just lacks a little bit. So overall, I think the S23 Ultra does sound a bit better, but you're not going to be disappointed on either of these. You're only going to really notice the difference is if you're comparing them. If you just get one or the other, you're going to think these are fantastic speakers, and they are fantastic speakers in my opinion on both of them. Both do come with a physical SIM card slot, and the OnePlus 11 is a dual SIM card slot compatible, so you can insert 2 SIMs in there if you wanted to. And the placements of the buttons is a little bit different. On the S23 Ultra, it does have the power button and the volume rocker on the exact same side, which the benefit of that is that you have the ability to prop it up without having to worry that you might accidentally click one of those buttons when you're like watching a video or something. On the OnePlus 11, it is on opposite sides, so you have the power button on one side and then the volume rocker on the other. The benefit of that is that if you have this device in your pocket, you can distinguish which button is which and like quickly lower the button or double click the power button to go into the camera mode or something like that. But either way, there's pros and cons to that, so it's kind of up to you to decide what you prefer and stuff like that. Personally, I think I prefer having it on one side just because it makes it simpler, or you don't have to worry about that accidental clicking of the buttons when you're propping it up. And then both of them do have a unique hardware feature. First, on the S23 Ultra, you do have the S-Pen, which basically is a stylus on the go for you. So at all times, you have this stylus that you can use to take notes. You can use it to control your device with air gestures, so swiping around within the software itself, or like controlling your music and stuff like that. You can also use it as a shutter button, so prop your phone up and then back up, and then you could take a photo with your S-Pen. You can also do precise screenshots. I like doing this sometimes where I want to take a screenshot of something specific and don't want to screenshot of the whole page. Just pull out your S-Pen and you can take a quick screen grab, and then you can even take a note straight up on that screenshot, which is pretty cool. But overall though, I really wouldn't say I use the S-Pen too much. It's there, it's cool. If you're someone who would definitely benefit from it, then that's something that you're only going to really get on the S23 Ultra. On the OnePlus 11, the unique hardware feature that it has is that sound switcher. So you have the ability to physically switch the sound of the OnePlus 11 without having to turn on your device. So you can either go into ring, mute, or vibrate. So you have those different options and you can just easily switch between it and you're good to go. So there's no need to unlock your device, like I said, versus the S23 Ultra. If I need to quickly mute my device for some reason, then I have to unlock it and go into the quick settings to quickly switch up the sound mode, which I think I honestly would benefit more from the switcher over the S-Pen. But if I'm being honest, you can't really compare them because they're completely different use cases. So I guess it's kind of up to you, like which special hardware feature you prefer. And I want to mention haptics real quick because both of them are actually pretty good. It's hard to decide which one I prefer. I like to increase the intensity to the maximum because I like the feel of those haptics, and I want to say I like the OnePlus 11 because it just feels a little bit stronger. I don't know how to describe it, but honestly, whichever one you pick, it's similar to the sound, both of them are going to have really good haptics. As far as the IP ratings, the S23 Ultra does have an IP68 water and dust resistant rating, which means that it's tight from dust, it's safe from dust. But for water, it is rated up to, I think, 1.5 meters of submersion. But either way, you can submerge this device, but I think it depends if what kind of water it is. Versus the OnePlus 11, again, IP64, so 6 means that it's rated against dust, no problem. But the 4 means that it can withstand splashes. I've read that apparently that OnePlus just doesn't want to pay for the higher ratings, so it can potentially survive submerging, but I'm not going to test that. I splash my phone every now and then when I'm either in the shower or just splash it for B-roll, and it survives, so splashing is fine, but submerging is guaranteed on the S23 Ultra. Now, as far as the displays, the S23 Ultra is going to have a 6.8-inch 120Hz 1440p dynamic AMOLED HDR10 plus 1700 high nittage display, whatever that means. And then the OnePlus 11 does have a 6.7-inch 120Hz LTPO3 fluid AMOLED. I've lost the specs and forget the terms, but either way, both of these devices have fantastic displays. I think whichever one you get, if you compare them, again, similar to the sound and the haptics, you'll see some differences, but in reality, both of them are just good for everything that you likely do in your day-to-day. So as far as the colors and as far as the looks, it's really going to come down to how you set up your device, because there's a lot of different settings that you can mess with. There's everything from using eye comfort shield, natural tone. There's an enhanced eye comfort shield on the S23 Ultra, which will lower the vividness of your device. You can choose between vivid and natural within the settings. So it's really going to come down to how you tweak your settings. It's up to you to decide which one you prefer, and also keep in mind that my camera may pick up slightly different colors, and also the display you're watching this video on may sway the colors one way or another as well. So you kind of have to see these devices in person to really get an idea of what they look like, but overall, both of them are good. Both of them are also very smooth devices, 120 Hz variable refresh rate, but I did notice that the OnePlus 11 will go down to 1 Hz with most of the time whenever you're not using the display and it's just sitting there. It'll go down to 1 Hz versus the OnePlus 11 or versus the S23 Ultra. I've noticed that it just sits at 24. Now this is going off from the show the refresh rate feature from the developer options, so I'm not sure if that's a limit of the developer options, but either way, that's something that it's showing on there. I really don't care, because where it would make a difference is in the battery life, and both of them, which I'll get to later, have really good battery life. So just whatever, both of them are smooth, both of them are clean. One thing I did notice is that some apps are better optimized, I guess, for the refresh rate on the S23 Ultra, just because, for example, YouTube runs at 120 Hz versus on the OnePlus 11 runs at 60 Hz. Not really a big deal because you're going to be watching a video, but when you're scrolling around trying to find a video, it looks a lot smoother on the S23 Ultra. Both devices also get plenty bright enough. Again, if you're comparing them side by side, the S23 Ultra definitely can get brighter up to, I think, 1700 peaks of nittage or whatever, but this mostly only happens when you're outside in direct sunlight. But even then, you do have this extra brightness mode, which kicks it up even brighter. So I did see and notice, again, comparing them side by side, the S23 Ultra definitely looks a bit brighter compared to the OnePlus 11, but OnePlus 11 still plenty bright enough to get you through a very sunny day. The big major difference between the displays is going to be how they're kind of designed. So on the S23 Ultra, you do have a little bit of a curve on the edge, but then you have almost like a box-to-box look to it, where it reaches the corner and just has a slightly rounded corner there, versus the OnePlus 11, again, also has a curved display. I think a slightly more curved display, but when you reach the corners, it kind of rounds itself out. It just has a rounded corner, I should say. So it kind of looks like the OnePlus 11 does have slightly bigger bezels on the top and at the bottom compared to the S23 Ultra. Just looks more box to box. You notice this when you're watching like a video, depending on the aspect ratio of the video. Sometimes it looks like the OnePlus 11 will have a slightly bigger box, or bigger black side. So on the black bars just look a little bit bigger on the OnePlus 11. And both of them also have a singular camera cutout. The OnePlus 11 has it on the left corner versus the S23 Ultra does have it down the middle. I prefer the symmetrical look of the S23 Ultra, but honestly, neither get in the way because it's such a small little circle cutout. And as far as the biometrics and lock screen options, both of them have the exact same options available. So for lock screen options, you have a PIN, a password, and you can also use a pattern. And then for biometrics, you do also have facial recognition on both of them, and also an under-display fingerprint sensor. So first, the facial recognition, both of them I believe is a 2D recognition, and it's just using your camera to use a picture of yourself. And again, they have similar features where you can either go directly into your home screen, or you can have it so that it's locked, or you have to swipe to unlock, so it'll unlock your lock screen and stay on your lock screen. And one cool feature there too as well is that you can lock your notifications until it recognizes your face, and then once it sees your face, it'll show those notification details. But either way, both of them are actually pretty fast. And one thing I noticed is that the animation for when they turn on, like the actual devices, is a little bit different, which kind of makes the OnePlus 11 look like it's a bit faster, because the animation is a little bit slower. So while that animation is happening, the OnePlus 11 looks like it's just jumping right into your home screen. You can't even see the lock screen when you're using your facial recognition. Versus the S23 Ultra, it turns on faster, so you do see your lock screen for like a split second or two. And then you get into your home screen whenever you have it set up so that it goes straight into your home screen. So it makes it look like facial recognition is a lot faster on the OnePlus 11, but honestly, both of them are plenty fast enough and about the same reliableness. So sometimes when you're in a very low light situation, or your phone's like very far away from you, sometimes they may not recognize you right away. So I would say it's like 95% of the time it works just fine. As far as the fingerprint sensors, the OnePlus 11 does use an optical one versus ultrasonic on the S23 Ultra. So the biggest difference that I'm seeing is that both of them are actually pretty fast and for the most part pretty reliable. The OnePlus 11 does require you to hold your finger down just a little bit longer, like a solid second, versus on the S23 Ultra, it can be like a quick tap and you're in. So that's the only big difference. So I would say that both of them are equally reliable. And when you have both facial recognition and then the fingerprint sensor also set up, if one misses you, just use the other one and you're in with no problem. As far as the performance, both devices on all different models that they offer are all gonna have the Snapdragon 8 Gen 2. The S23 Ultra does have like an optimized or made for Samsung Snapdragon 8 Gen 2, so I think it's like a little bit overclocked. But either way, they both perform really well. So there are different tiers though. So the base model does have 8 GB of RAM on the OnePlus 11. Same thing with the S23 Ultra. And then the base model has 128 GB of storage on the OnePlus 11 versus 256 GB of storage on the S23 Ultra. And one thing to mention there too is that on the base model of the OnePlus 11, it does have the older UFS 3.1, which isn't like anything terrible. It's just not as fast as the new UFS 4.0. And both of them also have the new, I think, LPDDR5X RAM, which is also a little bit more efficient and faster, I think double the speed. But either way, it's got the newer specs essentially. So what does that all mean? Basically, both devices are great. Like I said, both of them are going to be performing really well. At this point, it's really hard to say this one's better, because both of them have the almost exact same chip and perform the exact same. So whatever you're doing in your day-to-day, even if it's just hours of scrolling social media, hours of scrolling TikTok or YouTube or watching content, whatever you're doing, you're going to be just fine on either of these devices. The devices don't get anywhere near hot to the touch, so they'll get maybe warm, but that's it. They're not going to experience any kind of like major heatness or overheating on either of these devices. And the performance stays solid throughout both devices at all times. You can even push the devices with multitasking, playing games, using the camera, and both of them will continue to just perform well. So it doesn't matter what you're doing, doesn't matter how long you're doing it for, both devices are just going to be solid when it comes to performance. Now we're going to get into the software. So this is where, for me personally, the phone will either make or break the experience, because you can have the best hardware, the best specs, the best looking device out there, but if the software isn't perfect or isn't really well optimized or just good, then really it just breaks the user experience for me. So both of them are running Android 13, but of course Samsung is running One UI 5.1 and then Oxygen OS 13 on the OnePlus 11. I know you can download APKs or other launchers and stuff like that, but for me, I like to keep things mostly stock. There are some, maybe one or two additional apps I'll download, but besides that, I like to keep things as stock as possible to see what you really get when it comes to each software package. Starting off the lock screen, the S23 Ultra allows you to customize that clock style. So you can either choose different colors or also different styles. On OnePlus, It doesn't at all. Oxygen OS just sticks you with one style and that's it. The next thing is the way the notifications are presented to you. So the S23 Ultra can either show them as an icon, not show them at all, or show them as a banner. OnePlus 11 or Oxygen OS is a banner at all times. So it's not bad, but the fact that it doesn't show you all your notifications can be misleading if you don't realize that you might be missing a notification here or there. So it'll show you like the top 3, and then once you unlock your device, it'll show you the top 2 or top 3, depending on how it fits because of the padding. And it doesn't show you the rest of the notification. It doesn't say, hey, you have more notifications on top of these first 2 that I'm showing you. One UI will show you the top 3 or so with the actual details, and then it'll show you little icons letting you know that there's not just only these ones, but there's more down here as well. So then you'll be like, oh, okay, let me check it out. You'll pull down the notification drawer and see the rest of your notifications. For the OnePlus 11, like I said, it doesn't tell you that. So that's one small thing that I wish that Oxygen OS would do. Another thing is going to be that you can't customize your, or I guess you can, but you're very, very, very limited on the 3 or 2 options that you have for the icons at the bottom, or your apps that you can choose at the bottom. So you can either choose, I think, the Google Assistant or your device home, and I think that's, or Google Pay, I think as well. And on the S23 Ultra, either or, you can customize and select any app. There's a couple options for settings and stuff like that, but you can literally pick whichever app you want to choose. I will give props to the Oxygen OS for allowing you to switch up the fingerprint sensor animation, but that's pretty much it, honestly. And both of them also have an always on display, and personally I don't use the always on display, but you can do a decent amount of customization on both of them, so I won't knock points on either of them. I'm not even keeping track of points, honestly, but it's there if you want to use the always on display. Now, getting into the actual home screens, I would say they're slightly similar, but some of the things I like to do is, one, you can freely move apps anywhere, place widgets anywhere, but on the S23 Ultra, you do have the ability to stack widgets, which just allows you to clean up your pages a little bit more on your home screen, so you don't have a ton of pages on there. But the OnePlus 11 does allow you to enlarge your folders. So basically, you can create a folder and then enlarge it, and you can still interact with each individual app within that folder. So that basically means you can put a ton of apps on your home screen without taking up too much space. So you can you can create a grid inside a grid, which is kind of cool. One big thing that I personally like to do is always remove the labels from my icons. So basically just make the icons just show up on their own with no label. On Oxygen OS, it's part of the stock settings. On One UI, you do have to download, like I said, good luck. Not really a third-party app, but an additional app on that Samsung makes that allows you to customize a ton of other stuff. I won't get into the nitty-gritty of all the other modules and stuff like that because there's a ton you could possibly do. I just stick with some of the basic stuff. So in my case, Home Up, which basically allows me to customize or remove the icon labels. You can also use a third-party icon set. So if you want to get a third-party from either the Galaxy Store or get something from the Play Store, you could completely install your own icon pack on here if you wanted to, which is pretty cool. I don't think OnePlus 11 or Oxygen OS allows you to do that, but so you do have some freedom on customizing directly in the stock settings with Oxygen OS. Next place I want to talk about is the notifications and then the quick settings. So for one, I don't know why Oxygen OS uses so much padding for the notifications sometimes. It takes up pretty much one whole area, or like almost 2/3 of the, 1/3 of the screen here, versus on One UI it just uses a simple banner. Sometimes it will be a little bit thicker or bigger, but you can see pretty much all of my notifications here, versus on Oxygen OS, look at that thick padding right there, look at that. So yeah, I'm not sure why it just has to increase the padding for some of these. And again, if you have a ton of notifications on One UI, similar to the lock screen, it'll start to show icons once it starts to run out of space. Instead of showing you a banner, it'll show you all the icons of all the other apps that sent you notifications, versus on Oxygen OS, it just lists them all here. And if you see them, great. If you don't, if you just pull down and see the first couple, then you're like, oh, only have a few, and then you just move on, then you might miss some notifications. The next thing is how you interact with some of them, or just interact with them in general. So on Oxygen OS, swiping from the left, it takes you to this little mini menu where you can either swipe again to clear it, or click to clear it, or click a settings button. That's the same thing as if you were to hold a notification and open up this like notification menu thing. On One UI, either way will swipe and clear the notification. And if you want to open up that same menu that Oxygen OS has, again, you just hold it and it opens up the exact same menu. So no idea why Oxygen OS decides to add that extra step when you're swiping only from going to the left. It's just pointless. I don't understand why it's needed. And then when you're using or when you get notifications from the same app, it usually groups them. But one thing is also how you interact with them. On One UI, clicking on that group without opening it first will take you straight into the app. On Oxygen OS, you have to open the group and then select which notification you want to go to. It may depend on what you prefer there, because some people may think that's better because you may not want to accidentally click the whole group. You may want to try to access that one specific notification. So really decides on what you prefer. Personally, I'm used to how One UI works, so I prefer having to just click into that group and going straight into the app. And then in the actual quick setting toggles, I don't like that on Oxygen OS, you may not know exactly how one of these toggles is going to work. So some of them will open up this little pop-up that lets you access some quick settings within that setting, and then you have to click another button within that pop-up to go straight into the settings app for that section. Or sometimes it'll open up straight into the settings app, or sometimes holding down a toggle is the exact same interaction as just clicking the toggle. So there's 3 different ways that a toggle might react when you click on one of these quick settings on the Oxygen OS. Versus on One UI, one click is going to either turn it off or turn it on, like a toggle should, or if you hold it, it's going to take you straight into the settings, into that section. There's no extra pop-up, no extra couple steps. It's simple and easy. I don't understand why Oxygen OS does that, but it does that. And then on top of that, the way it looks, Oxygen OS, the top 2 toggles that you choose will be converted into this like rectangle look. Again, I'm not really sure why they decided to do that, but it's like that. And then they also have that same thing that Android 13 has in general, where the bottom section is, I guess, just set aside for the player media. So whenever you have music playing, whether it be YouTube or Spotify or something like that, this bottom section is dedicated for just a player, media player. So when there's no media playing, it's just an empty section. I don't understand why they can't bring everything down so that it's easier to reach with one hand. One UI, as you can see, it brings everything down so it's easy to access with one hand. So it's small things like that that just throw me off and make me a little bit frustrated with Oxygen OS sometimes. And real quick, I want to touch on the Google Discover page. I do like that Oxygen OS includes that search bar there versus no search bar on the S23 Ultra. So that means that when I am on my home screen, I do have to use a search bar widget. There's no search bar widget on Oxygen OS for my setup here, just because if I want to search something, I just swipe over to the Google Discover page. The next big section that is pretty vital to me that everyone uses in their day-to-day is that app drawer. For me personally, I like the ability to customize that app drawer. So on Oxygen OS, no customization at all. You can change the sorting, but that's pretty much it. So everything is there, no folders, no pages, no nothing. It's just a drawer. On One UI, you have the ability to customize and kind of move your apps wherever you want. So you can move all apps to one specific page. So you can kind of customize each page to be like a big folder. And then within that page, you can create folders as well. So for me, I like to have one page with all my Samsung apps, one page of all my Google apps, and then so on and so forth. So again, the freedom to customize there. I like that better on One UI. The last big software thing I want to talk about is multitasking. This is another big part of my day-to-day is, checking multiple things at the same time or watching YouTube and doing other stuff at the same time. So multitasking is a big deal to me. If it's not a big deal to you, then you can go ahead and skip this portion. But for me, multitasking is a big deal on One UI. It's just the much better streamlined and an optimized device for this. So for one, you can force every app to go into multitasking mode. So you can either split screen or drop windows. So every app can be forced into this mode, even if the developer didn't optimize the app to do so. But just keep in mind that it may cause the app to crash. So don't be surprised if you're trying to force like TikTok and Facebook or something like that into split screen mode and trying to double your toxicity by watching 2 social media apps and then the app crashes. Don't be surprised, because maybe it might not be optimized. But on Oxygen OS, it does allow you to do the same things, but it only allows you to use apps that are optimized, and the developer themselves created the app to be put into this whole multitasking mode. But before getting too deep into the multitasking, one feature that both of them have that I use to multitask is the Edge Bar / Smart Bar. So they both work relatively the same, where it's this little handle area that opens up like a mini app drawer where you can store a bunch of other apps. And on One UI, you can actually use a little bit more, do a little bit more than just store apps there. You can set up settings and quick contacts and stuff like that, which is pretty cool. But I mainly just use it to hold some apps, like a mini app drawer. So basically the way I multitask is that I'll open up that app drawer or open up the edge bar and then drag and drop the apps that I want to use to multitask. I try to do the same thing on Oxygen OS, but the way it kind of works threw me off a little bit and just made me annoyed. So on One UI, when you drag and drop an app, you can either drag it to go into the top portion of the screen to start split screening, or the bottom portion, or drop it down in the middle to open it up in a window mode. Personally, I don't use window mode, but it's there if you want it. On Oxygen OS, when you drag and drop, it automatically drops it into the top portion of the screen. So it's going to start split screen mode, similar to One UI, but it's always split screen mode. And so then once you go into that split screen mode, on One UI, the top part or bottom part, whichever part you chose first, will go into that first app. And then the next half, or the other half, will open up a mini app drawer so you can choose the next app you want to use to go into split screen mode. On Oxygen OS, it'll just keep that app hidden at the top, and it's going to ask you to select another app. So you either have to pick from your home screen or go into your app drawer and select from there. So that's like the extra step again to go into split screen mode. I'm definitely nitpicking here, but it's just how I feel. I'm being more detailed now, and that's just how I feel about that. It's one of the features that I use the most and just want to nitpick. The next thing when it comes to the edge bar and trying to use it is on Oxygen OS, when you click on one of the apps inside the edge bar or the smart bar, it opens it up in window mode. That's where I'm like, why? Why? I'm clicking on it to open the app. On One UI, when you click on one of the apps inside the edge bar, it opens it up normally. Like if you were to open it from the home screen or open it up from the app drawer, it just opens it up in full screen. That's my rant. That's just the end of the multitasking features. Better, in my opinion, on One UI. And then you have an abundance of all other kinds of features. So everything from private safe and secure folder. You also have material U on both of them, but it is a little bit different, where on Oxygen OS, you can kind of pick and choose what colors you want from your wallpaper to use. On One UI, it like dynamically selects some palettes for you or some single colors for you. So you do have a little bit more freedom there with Oxygen OS. You also have a bunch of modes and routines on both of them. But on One UI, you have a couple more different modes, and you can also change up a couple more settings when it comes to what you want each mode to do on your phone. Then you'll have the whole ecosystem stuff. Both of them are Android, so they will seamlessly connect with most other devices, and work pretty well with other devices. So Samsung devices such as, I don't know, your watches, your buds, your tablets and stuff like that will work just fine with the OnePlus 11, and then vice versa if you want to use the OnePlus buds and I think they're OnePlus watch or something like that. But either way, ecosystem isn't that big of a deal to me here. But as far as software updates, both of them are pretty much the same. So both of them will get 4 years of major OS updates and then 5 years of security updates from this year going forward. So you're good for a long time there. But one thing that may be a little bit different is how consistent they update the devices. On the previous model, on the OnePlus 10 Pro with OnePlus, I noticed that it was like every other month or so. And then on the S22 Ultra, it was pretty consistent throughout the year, so once every month. And so far, I have gotten at least one update on each device. So here's hoping that at least a month you get an update. But yeah, as far as software, you could definitely probably tell I'm all One UI. Subjectively, I'm definitely all One UI. Objectively, both of them provide you with a good amount of stuff, but those small annoyances will drive me towards One UI without a doubt. Now let's talk about these cameras, and I'll try to make the camera section brief because I'm not a heavy camera user and I don't really know much about photography or videography, so I just point and shoot, and if I get a good shot, great. So first, let's talk about the specs. So on the S23 Ultra, you're going to be getting a 12 megapixel f2.2 ultra wide with a 200 megapixel f1.7 wide, and then a 10 megapixel f2.4 telephoto, and then lastly a 10 megapixel f4.9 periscope telephoto on the back. On the front, you'll get a single 12 megapixel f2.2 wide with dual pixel autofocus. And on the OnePlus 11, you'll get a 48 megapixel f2.2 ultra wide on the back, and then a 50 megapixel f1.8 wide and a 32 megapixel f2.0 telephoto. And on the front, you'll get a 16 megapixel f2.5 wide. So starting with the front, I think selfies looked way better on the S23 Ultra just by looking at the samples that I took. For one, for some reason, the OnePlus 11 took the photos just a little bit too warm with their color tuning. I don't know why it looks so warm. And then also just a little bit more detailed, in my opinion, on the S23 Ultra. So if I had to choose one for selfies, it's going to be the S23 Ultra. For video, again, the S23 Ultra just knocks it out of the park here. For one, it has 4K versus 1080p on the OnePlus 11. So it just ends up having a lot more detail and it looks a lot better. Same thing with the color tuning. Again, the OnePlus 11 for some reason likes to keep the color warm on the front. So the video just looked a little too warm for my liking. And then you'll notice that sometimes when the foreground is like a little bit darker compared to the background where it's bright and lit up, the OnePlus 11 just way overexposes those areas. For the S23 Ultra, I did notice a little bit of overexposure, but not as bad compared to the OnePlus 11. Now, as far as the back cameras, the S23 Ultra, from the ultra wide down to the periscope zoom, you're just going to be getting an all-around really good shot. The detail is there, the processing that it does just makes the image look very good overall. Just no matter the situation that you're in, whether it be in a dark situation or a light situation, it just looks really good. On top of that, the cameras are consistent. So if we're going again from the ultra wide to the telephoto, the colors look pretty consistent as you just start to zoom in with each shot. On the other hand, the OnePlus 11, I would say it's solid when it comes to the optical zoom. So when you're using the ultra wide and using the wide and the telephoto, but once you start to use digital zoom, that's where the camera really quickly becomes to just drop off in quality. So the OnePlus 11 is capped out at a max of 20x zoom, digital zoom, versus the S23 Ultra, which will cap out at a 100x digital zoom. It may not be the best at 100x, but from like 10 all the way up to 30 or even 50, you could say that the quality is just miles better compared to the OnePlus 11. I also noticed that the OnePlus 11 was sometimes inconsistent in its color tuning. So how I said that the S23 Ultra was pretty consistent with its colors from the ultra wide to the telephoto. Sometimes on the OnePlus 11, I noticed that the ultra will be a little bit warm and then the wide will be a little bit cooler or in the middle or vice versa. So sometimes the colors were just a little bit all over the place, but usually it looked a little bit warmer compared to the S23 Ultra. There were a few shots every now and then that they both looked very similar and overall pretty good. So not terrible on the OnePlus 11, but definitely I prefer the look and the more versatile camera photo shooting experience on the S23 Ultra. Both of them also have autofocus on the ultra wide, which allows you to do like a macro-like shot if you wanted to get something like that. So that's pretty neat on both of them. Now, as far as the back for video, similar to what I said, the photos, same thing can kind of be said with the video here. So for both of them, I shoot most of my video at 4K 30. The S23 Ultra had no problem at all. It covers me from the ultra wide again down to the telephoto. All three lenses can shoot 4K, but unfortunately the OnePlus 11 does not shoot 4K on all three lenses. It can only do 4K on the ultra wide and then the wide, but then once you switch to that telephoto or start to zoom in past 1x, that's where it starts to use digital zoom, and it just doesn't compare to the S23 Ultra. It just murders the OnePlus 11. The S23 Ultra does cap out at a max of 20x versus 10x on the OnePlus. Color-wise though, the S23 Ultra, fine, consistent. It wasn't too warm, too cool. It looked kind of natural. It looked just fine, added a decent amount of color. But then the OnePlus 11, for some reason, on some videos, I don't know if it was a display I was looking at it on or I was watching the video back on, but it just looked lifeless. Like it didn't really have much color. It looked a little bit too bright. But then in other shots, it was just fine. It went back to looking a little bit warm. Yeah, I'm not sure what was going on there. The S23 Ultra also just looked overall better stabilized. And speaking of the stabilization, the S23 Ultra does have a steady mode as well as the OnePlus 11, and I noticed that the S23 Ultra can shoot at 1440p at either 30 FPS or 60 FPS, versus the OnePlus 11 can only shoot at 1080p 60 FPS when using that stabilization mode. Another thing I noticed there too is that once you select either ultra wide or telephoto on the OnePlus 11, you can't switch to the other lens once you start recording. On the S23 Ultra, you can switch between both of them. So that's another downside of the OnePlus 11 video capabilities. And then lastly, both of them can shoot 8K, but the S23 Ultra can record up to 8K 30 FPS, only 24 FPS on the OnePlus 11 if 8K is important to you. So in conclusion, the S23 Ultra just murders the OnePlus 11 in my opinion when it comes to the cameras. So I won't even talk about social media. If social media is something you use for the cameras, again, the S22 Ultra is going to be the way to go. Now, as far as battery life, both of them have a 5,000 milliamp hour battery, and both of them, since they're running the new Snapdragon 8 Gen 2, which is more efficient, have phenomenal battery life. So everyone's usage will definitely vary depending on how your settings are set up and also depending on what you do in your day-to-day. But for me personally, for settings, I think I have everything pretty much maxed out. I don't try to handicap anything. And then for my usage, it's pretty simple, like social media usage, an occasional simple game here and there, lots of media consumption, listen to music and stuff like that in the background. So very simple stuff, I would say. So for me, I get anywhere from like 16 to 20 or 22 hours of total usage on my device, with a total of maybe 4 to 6 or 7 hours of screen on time. So for me, that's very good battery life. It doesn't matter which one it is, it's gonna get very similar battery life. So I guarantee you that whatever you do in your day-to-day, you're gonna be getting really good battery life. If you unplug in the morning, you're not gonna have to plug in again till the afternoon, or actually not even afternoon, until you go to bed, if even then. So battery life is good on these devices. Now, if you do have to charge, the S23 Ultra does have a max of 45 watts of fast charging, which equates to about an hour and like 10 minutes of charging, versus the OnePlus 11 that caps out at 80 watts with the included charger, which does come in the box. Caps out at 80 watts, which equates to about 30 minutes of fast charging. So that's insanely fast. So if for some reason you do have to charge, I think both of them will cover you, but the fact that the OnePlus 11 charges a lot faster is a good bonus and plus. But one plus of the S23 Ultra is going to be that it does come with wireless charging and reverse wireless charging. OnePlus 11 does not have that. For me, it's not a big loss, but it definitely depends on if you use it a lot. I know it's a pretty big convenience for a lot of people, but not for me. I really don't use wireless charging much these days. So at the end of the day, which one should you go out and get? Subjectively, I'm going to say the S23 Ultra. But objectively, on paper, the OnePlus 11 just looks very tempting for the price. Very good specs for what you're paying for. But as I use both devices, I can see why the S23 Ultra has that higher premium price. Is it worth that much more? I wish it was a little bit cheaper, but I think I'm willing to give up that extra money from what I'm getting here. So the way I would look at it is that the OnePlus 11 has great hardware, great performance, great battery life, but mid software and mid cameras, versus the S23 Ultra that just has great hardware, great performance, great battery life, great cameras, and great software. So it's just overall a great package. OnePlus 11, it's just missing some stuff, which I guess fits the price tag for me. So with that said, I hope that helped. Hope you guys enjoyed, and peace.